You ever lose everything? And realize the people who smiled beside you were the ones holding the knife? Yeah, that was me. My ex-wife and her business partner, the two people I trusted with my life, walked away with $8.1 million of my hard-earned money. 8 years of sweat, sacrifice, and stupid love, gone overnight. But here's the twist. I didn't just lose, because 3 months later, I found something my father built back in 1972, a hidden safe, and inside it was the one thing they never saw coming. You know what's funny? My dad couldn't even fix a leaky faucet, yet somehow he managed to save me from the grave. So yeah, they thought they buried me, but the thing about being buried, sometimes you're just being planted. Stick around, because what's inside that safe didn't just change my life, it ended theirs. Before I open that vault for you, hit that subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. Before everything went downhill, life was good. Not perfect, but good enough to make me believe it always would be. I had a wife who laughed at my bad jokes, a business partner who called me brother, and a father who left behind a small construction company that I turned into an empire. We built homes, schools, offices, dreams in concrete form. I used to walk through those sites and think, this is it, I made it. Sundays were for family. She'd make pancakes, I'd pour coffee, and he'd bring his laptop, pretending to check bids, while secretly planning golf trips. I trusted them both. God, I was blind. It started small. A missed call here, a late meeting there. She'd smile and say, "You work too much, honey." He'd clap my back and say, "Let her handle the accounts for a while. You deserve a break." I thought they cared. Turns out, they were preparing the perfect storm. One night, I found her phone buzzing nonstop. Messages from him. Business talk mixed with something else. My gut twisted. But love has this cruel way of whispering, "You're overreacting." So, I stayed quiet. Looking back, that silence was the start of my downfall. I ignored the signs, the secret smiles, the sudden business trips, the new jewelry I didn't buy. I thought loyalty could fix anything. I thought family meant something. And then came the day my father's old accountant called. "You sure you approved these transfers?" he asked. Transfers? I didn't even know about them. My name was on every signature, but none of those were mine. That's when the ground beneath me started to crack. The morning I realized it was all gone felt like watching my life evaporate in slow motion. I was sitting at my desk, sipping black coffee, when my banker called. His voice was polite, rehearsed, the kind of tone people use when they're about to ruin your day. He said, "Sir, the final transfer cleared yesterday. Are you sure you want to close all company accounts?" My heart froze. "What do you mean, close?" I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. I drove straight to the office, faster than I should have. The front desk girl wouldn't even meet my eyes. My wife's car wasn't in the lot. My partner's wasn't either, but their office lights were still on. I walked inside, and for a moment, the world felt too quiet. The files were gone. The company's seals, the ledgers, all of it. Just one envelope sitting on my desk, my name scrawled across it in her handwriting. I opened it, half expecting a confession, half praying it was a bad joke. Inside was a single note. "You were too busy chasing money to notice who was really holding it." No signature, no explanation, just that. I can't explain the sound that came out of me. Somewhere between a laugh and a scream. It's strange how betrayal doesn't hurt like a stab. It burns, slow, deep, like acid eating away at everything you believed in. I called her. No answer. I called him. Straight to voicemail. Within 24 hours, every business account tied to my name was empty. The lawyers said it looked like I'd signed off on every move. My best friend had forged my approval, and my wife notarized every signature. Perfect teamwork. I spent nights replaying every moment, every smile, every dinner, every "I love you." I'd picture her whispering those same words to him, maybe laughing about how I'd never find out. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, convinced it was all a nightmare. But the empty house and the eviction notice on the door reminded me it wasn't. I started drinking, barely sleeping. I'd stare at old photos, the vacations, the anniversary trips, and wonder how long they'd been planning this. Maybe from the beginning. Maybe I was just the investment that paid off. Then came the court summons. They wanted to remove me from the board of my own company. My ex-wife's lawyer said I was mentally unfit to handle finances. Her partner, my former friend, testified against me. The judge looked at me like I was just another greedy fool who lost control. They stripped me of everything. The house, the cars, the business my father built with his hands. I remember standing outside that courthouse holding a single box of my belongings when it hit me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was execution, but I wasn't done. Something inside me refused to die. There's a strange kind of power that comes when you have nothing left to lose. One night, I went back to my father's old house, the one he left me after he passed. I hadn't been there in years. Dust covered the floors, cobwebs hung from every corner, but it felt like home. I sat in his study, staring at the old wooden desk where he used to balance his ledgers by hand. That's when I noticed it. A faint set of numbers carved beneath the drawer. 1972. It didn't mean much at first. Just a date, maybe? But something about it felt deliberate. My father was never careless with details. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept going back to that number. 1972. What happened that year? Why carve it where no one would see? I didn't know it yet, but that number, that single clue, was about to change everything. For weeks after finding those numbers, I lived like a ghost, half awake, half broken, moving through days that didn't seem real. My reputation was gone, my friends had vanished, and even my lawyer stopped returning calls once he realized I couldn't pay. I used to run a company with 50 employees. Now I couldn't even afford a meal that didn't come from a can. Every morning, I sat in Dad's old office, staring at that number, 1972. I didn't know why it haunted me, but it did. My father was a quiet man, the kind who didn't say much but meant every word. He'd built the business from nothing, survived 2 recessions, and somehow managed to keep his dignity through it all. Maybe that number was his way of speaking to me now, from wherever he was. I started digging. Old files, blueprints, even newspaper clippings. Turns out, 1972 was the year he built this house. Every inch of it by hand. No contractors, no outside help. Just him, his tools, and a stubborn heart. That made me curious. What did he build that he didn't want anyone else to find? As I searched through the attic, I found an old box labeled personal. Inside were dusty ledgers, letters, and a photo of my father standing beside a steel vault door. My breath caught. There it was, faint but clear. The same numbers etched above it, 1972. For the first time in months, I felt something other than anger. I felt purpose. But the deeper I looked, the worse things got. My ex-wife and her partner weren't just thieves. They were smart thieves. They'd re-registered the company under a new name, moved assets offshore, and even used my forged signature to take out loans in my name. Every time I tried to fight back, I got buried under more paperwork, more lies. I went to the police. They smiled politely and told me to hire a private investigator. I went to lawyers. They said I didn't have enough evidence, and every night, I sat alone in that creaky house, listening to the wind whistle through broken windows, thinking maybe they were right. Maybe I was beaten. Then, one night, something strange happened. The power went out. The whole house went black. I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the basement to check the fuse box. As the light swept across the concrete walls, I saw a faint outline. A square shape, almost invisible under layers of paint. I got closer and tapped it. Hollow, my heart started pounding. I scraped away the paint, and there it was. A hidden metal panel with the numbers 1972 carved faintly into the corner. My hands were shaking. I pressed against it, and the panel gave a little, like a door that hadn't been opened in decades. But it wouldn't budge. I laughed nervously. "Really, Dad? You couldn't just leave me a note?" I whispered into the dark. For a second I almost cried, not because I was scared, but because for the first time in so long, I felt close to him again. I spent the next 2 days prying at that wall, searching for a lock, a latch, anything. On the 3rd night, I found it. A small keyhole hidden behind a pipe. Of course, the key was nowhere to be found. I tore through every drawer, every shelf, every photo frame in the house. Nothing. Then I remembered the watch. My father's old wristwatch I'd kept in a drawer upstairs. He used to say, "This watch keeps time, but it also keeps secrets." I never knew what he meant until that moment. I flipped it over, and inside the backplate, taped to the metal, was a tiny brass key. I held it up, whispering, "You clever old man." When I turned the key, the wall gave a soft metallic click. Dust rained down. The panel creaked open just enough for me to see the edge of something inside. Cold, steel, and heavy. My flashlight beam landed on a small vault door, covered in rust. The word Bauer engraved across the front. My father's name. That's when I realized he'd left something behind, something he didn't trust the world with, and I had no idea that what was inside that safe would not only clear my name, it would destroy theirs. The moment that safe revealed itself, everything inside me shifted. For the first time in months, I wasn't just surviving. I was searching for something that might finally make sense of all the chaos. My hands were trembling, the air in that basement thick with dust and memories. I wiped off the rusted handle and whispered, "All right, Dad. What did you hide down here?" The door wouldn't move at first. 40 years of silence had sealed it shut. I fetched a crowbar from the shed, wedged it into the edge, and pulled with every ounce of strength left in me. The sound it made, that deep metallic groan, felt almost alive. When it finally cracked open, a gust of stale air hit my face, cold and heavy like time itself. Inside was a small steel box, a stack of ledgers, and an old envelope with my father's handwriting. For when everything falls apart, my throat went dry. I sat on the dusty floor, staring at that note, afraid to open it. What could he possibly have known? I tore the envelope open, and a single page slipped out. It wasn't long, just a letter in his neat, deliberate script. "If you're reading this, it means someone's taken from you. People lie, son. Numbers don't. Everything you need to rebuild, and to expose the liars, is in these ledgers. Trust the math." That's all it said, but it was enough. I opened the first ledger, and within minutes, my world shifted again. Every page detailed company transactions, handwritten, precise, from the early years of our business. But there was more. Tucked inside was a sealed folder labeled Property Ownership Transfer, 1995. Inside that folder were documents showing my father's personal trust still owned controlling interest in the company. Not me, not my wife, not my partner. Legally, everything tied to his estate was still his, which meant still mine. My ex-wife and her partner hadn't stolen from me. They'd stolen from him. I laughed. Actually laughed. Sitting there in the dark like a man who just found gold in his backyard. And in a way, I had. There was also something else in that safe. A small black notebook filled with bank account details. My father had been quietly saving profits in a separate fund, untouched, unregistered, hidden from the business books. The total, just over $8 million. The same amount they had taken from me. Coincidence? No, my father had planned this. He knew someday greed would come knocking. And somehow, he'd made sure I'd have a way back. I spent that night going through every document, every line, piecing together the truth. The ledgers proved the company's legal ownership. The trust papers showed that every transaction my ex-wife and her partner made was, technically, theft from the estate. The irony was almost poetic. Their greed had made them criminals twice over. By sunrise, I was exhausted, but alive in a way I hadn't felt in months. The fear was gone, replaced with something sharper. Purpose. I poured myself a cup of cold coffee and looked around that old basement, whispering, "You outsmarted them, Dad. You really did." And right then, I knew it wasn't enough to just survive. I was going to make them pay. I didn't scream. I didn't punch walls. I sat down, let the weight of what I'd found settle, and then I started moving like a man who finally remembered how to breathe. This wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. This was fixing what was broken. My name, my father's legacy, and the truth. First, I made copies. Not sloppy pictures with my phone. Clean scans, notarized copies. The kind of paper that looks official before anyone reads it. I hired a forensic accountant on a small retainer. Yeah, I used the last of my cash. Because numbers don't lie, and they can't be argued with on a whim. He read the ledgers and then he stared. He said, "These entries don't match anything on the books. Someone cooked the books and hid the profits." I told him, "Good, make it neat. Make it bulletproof." Next I moved quietly. If I'd learned anything from being blindsided, it was that noise helps the other side hide. I opened a new email account, anonymous, and sent the scans to a trusted journalist I'd met years ago at a charity event. The kind of reporter who loves a story that smells of greed and betrayal. I waited. He replied within the hour. "This is big. Can we meet?" Meanwhile, I filed a motion with a lawyer who still owed me a favor. The trust documents and ledgers were enough to file an emergency injunction to freeze assets tied to the estate. The court can act fast when money walks away through back doors. The judge signed the freeze that afternoon. Suddenly, transfers stopped. Accounts were locked. Their freedom to move cash vanished like smoke. When the phone stopped buzzing, I felt something I hadn't in months. Control. I let the legal machinery hum. I let the journalist dig. I let the accountant write a report that read like a slow-moving bomb. You don't win by yelling thief in public. You win by making proof louder than lies. So I made proof a headline. The reporter ran a piece that morning. Local power couple accused of embezzling 8.0 mets. Documents show trust misuse. The article laid out the facts without drama. Facts are cruel when you're the liar. Their faces on TV were a study in panic. My ex-wife called our circle of mutual friends, tried to spin a story about a bitter divorce, about me being unstable. But the bank freezes, the notarized scans, and the accountant's clean math made her story thin. The partner's phone calls went unanswered. He started canceling meetings, backing away from the businesses he'd built on other people's signatures. Then the small, painful pleasures started. An old client called to say he'd received a notice reclaiming funds he'd been convinced were legitimately transferred. A former employee told me she'd been contacted by investigators. The board that had voted me out called an emergency meeting and quietly resigned. One by one the dominoes fell. Not because I wanted to see them fall, but because truth has better timing than revenge. I didn't gloat. I didn't seek public humiliation. I watched. I let the law do its job. They were charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Court dates popped up like mushrooms after rain. Depositions, affidavits, cross-examinations. The theater they feared became their stage. Their partners started turning on them in exchange for lighter sentences. People who once wore their smiles now avoided their eyes. Pride is loud until the gavel slams. The final moment came slow and quiet. In a sealed room, surrounded by lawyers and a camera crew I hadn't invited, I sat and watched them sign papers to repay what they'd taken. They tried to bargain, to barter, to blame. But the ledgers and the trust were patient witnesses. The money didn't fix what they broke. It only paid for the mess they made. I left the courtroom a different man, not because the money was back. The rebuilding would take time. But because the truth had a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. The soft click of a lock closing on a lie. When it was finally over, I didn't feel the fireworks I thought I would. No victory parade, no rush of triumph. Just silence, heavy, calm, and strangely comforting. I walked out of that courthouse with the same old briefcase I'd carried for years. But this time it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like closure. I went back to my father's house, the one that had become both my prison and my sanctuary. The sun was setting, spilling gold across the cracked floorboards. For months, I'd cursed this place. The creaks, the dust, the memories that wouldn't let me rest. But that evening, it felt different. The house had kept its promise. It had held the truth until I was ready to find it. I sat in his old chair and looked at the safe. Now open. Quiet. Empty. It hit me how life comes full circle. My father built that vault to protect his legacy. I used it to reclaim mine. He'd known something I never understood back then. You don't store your trust in people. You store it in truth. I thought about my ex-wife. About how greed starts small. A whisper. A temptation. then a fire that consumes everything it touches. Maybe she'll spend years trying to rebuild. Maybe she won't. I don't hate her anymore. I don't forgive her either. I just let her go. There's a strange peace in losing everything. It forces you to see what can't be stolen. Grit, memory, and the kind of faith that comes from surviving the worst. I rebuilt the company. Slowly. Quietly. With a smaller team and a cleaner heart. I stopped chasing millions and started chasing meaning. Some nights, when I'm locking up the office, I still whisper to my father's picture on the wall. You were right, old man. People lie. Numbers don't. And if you're listening to this, maybe that's the real lesson. No matter who betrays you, no matter how far you fall, the truth has a way of finding its way home. If you've made it this far, take it from someone who's lived through the worst. Losing money hurts, but losing trust, that scars deeper. Yet sometimes, what's taken from you isn't gone forever. It's just waiting to be reclaimed in a different form. My father's hidden safe wasn't just metal and bolts. It was faith, buried under time, waiting for me to wake up. So, if life's betrayed you, don't break. Dig deeper. The truth always leaves clues. And hey, if this story hit home, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Someone out there might need to hear it today.